The campaign to retake Mosul, Iraq's second largest city, has begun. It represents a milestone in the campaign to defeat ISIS in northern Iraq. But as Middle East expert Jonathan Spire warns, it also represents a new and perhaps more dangerous time in the Middle East, something he calls a war over the ruins. Jonathan, you just came back from Kurdistan. What are the dangers that you see when ISIS is defeated, perhaps in a few months or a few years?
Well, look, here's the thing. ISIS ultimately was a manifestation or a symptom of a much larger problem. And that problem is that Iraq is a divided country, divided along ethnic and sectarian lines. The fact of the matter is that the Sunni Arab people of Nineveh province as a whole, and of Mosul city in particular, were not particularly hostile to ISIS when it came in 2014. On the contrary, they're very, very hostile or upset with the government in Baghdad, controlled of course by the Dawa party, a Shia Islamist party of which the current Prime Minister, Mr. Abadi, is a member. With the strong feeling the Sunnis had that was a government not committed to their welfare, not able to represent Sunnis. So from a certain point of view, they actually welcomed ISIS in. Of course, I assume they have now recovered from the sense that ISIS could represent anything positive for them. But the issue is that once ISIS is driven out, the underlying matter of Sunni-Shia division, very stark division in the country, will not go away. It will resurface. Will the Sunni Arabs of Mosul welcome the Shia-led Iraqi security forces into Mosul? Maybe they'll welcome on the day they come in. That sort of basic division in Iraq between Sunni and Shia Arabs, and then of course also with regard to the equally deep divisions between Arabs and Kurds, these are the things that are going to still be very much manifest once Mosul is taken, and it's going to manifest itself, I think, pretty soon. Who's going to control the city afterwards? What about the minority communities? What about the Shia militias? What about the Kurds? What about the areas of friction and conflict between them?
If there is a vacuum created, and you have the Kurds, the Shiite militias, the Iraqi government, the Iranians, the Syrians, the Turks, the Russians, do you see that as a potential explosive situation?
Well, yeah, I don't think the conflict is going to end in Iraq when ISIS is defeated. This is the point. ISIS is now, it's already lost around 50% of its holdings in Iraq. If and when Mosul does fall, any pretensions ISIS might have had to constituting an Islamic state in Iraq will effectively be gone. They'll be reduced to holding, some remote rural areas close to the Syrian border. But big question mark as to whether there's been sufficient reform and change in the Iraqi army since that terrible summer of 2014 when the army essentially fell apart. And my sense at least was a great deal still remains to be done, and I'm not yet convinced the Iraqi army is still a workable force. But secondly, the political side, the Kurds of course are surrounding the city to the east, north and west. And every Kurdish commander that I spoke to some of the most senior men on the lines there, want to talk about nothing other than Kurdish independence and the sense that they are no longer part of Iraq, and the way in which the fight for Mosul could be seen as a staging ground towards a Kurdish bid for independence. Of course, the Iraqi army absolutely opposed to that. Then put into the mix that the Turkish army is there close to Mosul in a place called Bashika, training a Sunni militia. Then put into the mix the fact that the Shia militias, supported by Iran, are also looking to play some kind of role in the Mosul area. So my sense is that when you look to the political level as well as the military, you discover, a very interesting and very confused and very divided reality.
And how about the Iraqi government? What's their agenda?
The Iraqi government is a Shia Islamist government, and I think that what's becoming increasingly clear is that this government is not really interested or able even to govern on behalf of all Iraqis, but rather is increasingly about building the power of the Iraqi Shia Arab majority, just to a great extent at the expense of the Sunni Arab minority and indeed of the Kurds as well. So I would say that the Iraqi government is more and more openly looking like a sectarian government.
Are they more and more allied with Iran, or is Iran influence on them dominating?
I think Iran's very much gaining an influence. ISIS and the rise of ISIS is largely a cause for that, because when ISIS came in and Baghdad was under real threat, Ayatollah Sistani, the venerated Shia cleric in Iraq, ordered a mobilization of Shia militias to defend Baghdad. And the fact of the matter is that mobilization is now 100,000 men strong. And many different militias, but the 5 or 6 central militias in that mobilization are all linked to Iran. The sense is that the Iranians are very good at taking advantage of countries that are falling apart. They work very well in those environments. And Syria is an example of that, and Iraq also is increasingly an example of that.
Could it get even larger, this conflict?
Well, here's the thing. What you effectively have, in my view at least, is you have one conflict today which encompasses both Iraq and Syria. Effectively, those countries have collapsed and fragmented. And what you have is a kind of war over the ruins being fought out between a whole variety of different political, military forces over the ruins of those countries. So between the Iraq-Iran border and the Mediterranean Sea today, there is not any single properly functioning state, and I'd include Lebanon in that mix too. And what there is instead of that is a kind of ongoing, roiling, very difficult to resolve conflict or series of conflicts between different interests, each trying to advance their own interests over the ruins of what those countries once were.
Well, Jonathan, thank you for being with us on Jerusalem Dateline. Appreciate your insight and expertise.
Most welcome.